Shock.
Is it true that BTS's Jin was forced to shoot even though he was too tired? What really happened when he fell on the spot? Is this the price of an untimely acting debut? What really happened to Kim Seokjin, or better known as BTS's Jin, when he made his first acting debut? Why did the supposedly enthusiastic and passionate set become precisely the place where his body collapsed, falling into a silence that shocked all the crew? Dan, is it true that no one stopped the camera when Jin finally collapsed from exhaustion? These questions started rolling wild, not just in ARMY circles, but also in the ears of anyone who cared about the human side of an idol who had been smiling in front of the camera. Was this Jin's fall just a minor incident due to a weakened physique? Or is there a much deeper and painful story behind this debut? No one would have thought that the great hopes that were poured onto his shoulders actually turned into unbearable pressure. Jin, once known as worldwide handsome and a charismatic idol, now reveals her most vulnerable and tragic side, not in front of the camera in dramatic scripted scenes, but behind the scenes as her body surrenders in heartbreaking silence. Imagine a shooting room full of lights, the director shouting, "Action," and everyone focused on the script. But as the genie began to lose her balance and fall slowly to the floor, neither of them acted immediately. Is it because everyone thinks it's part of acting? Or did indeed no one really notice that Jin had been exhausted long before the camera started recording? Some eyewitnesses mentioned that from the very morning, Jin looked lethargic and his eyes were not as bright as usual. He stood up, smiled, and said, "I'm fine," to every staff member who asked how he was doing. But is it the truth? Or is it just an automatic sentence that he has used too often as a shield to cover his pain? Jin's acting debut has been awaited for so long. Fans thought this would be a moment of triumph, but who would have thought that it would be precisely the beginning of his toughest ordeal? When he signed on for the project, no one could have imagined that he would have to go through an interminable filming schedule, breaks of only 2 hours a day, and long scripts that demanded extreme emotions, all in the midst of his transition from music to the screen. Did the agency know that Jin's body wasn't in top shape when the project started? Was there a warning from the medical team? Or is it just that the warning was ignored in order to maintain the production schedule? One of the crew leaked that the night before the incident, Jin had vomited twice in the locker room but refused to be called a doctor. "Don't make this big. I don't want to delay anyone's schedule," Jin said, as he tried to clean up after himself. Does the sentence reflect dedication, or is it actually an inaudible cry for help? And that day, when the climactic scene was filmed, in which the character played by Jin had to run down an artificial rain, screaming with gasps, that's when everything collapsed. After the third take, Jin falls. Not acting. Not a gimmick. A real fall. His eyes were closed. His body didn't move. 1 second, 2 seconds, the world seemed to stop turning. Why hasn't anyone stopped filming since those signs of fatigue appeared? Why do we always only care when an idol falls, not when they are still standing with difficulty? Paramedics were called in a hurry. Jin's body temperature dropped dramatically. His blood pressure plummeted. And when he finally regained consciousness in the ambulance, the first words that came out of his mouth were, "Is the shooting over?" A question that made one of the crew cry in disbelief. Even in such conditions, Jin was still thinking about work. And now we ask, has the entertainment industry turned into a heartless machine? Is this the price that Jin has to pay for realizing his dream of playing drama? Or actually, his dream has turned into a nightmare? The questions were further fueled when CCTV footage emerged from the scene showing Jin limping to the bathroom just minutes before he fell. Behind the bathroom door, a sob was heard. Is she crying? Why didn't anyone go inside and check? Meanwhile, HYB issued a brief statement. Jin has decreased stamina due to physical stress. It is in the process of recovery. But is that really all? Or are there facts deliberately buried so as not to provoke even greater unrest? Jin's family reportedly objected to the project from the start, knowing that Jin had not fully recovered from the military pressure. Yes, military pressure. Do not forget, a few months ago, Jin had just completed his mandatory military service, and he had not really had time to adjust to the civilian world. So, why was he immediately thrown onto the set without a transition time? Her sister, Kim Supjung, posted a cryptic Instastory the day after the incident. Even heroes need a break. The sentence went viral. Fans began to speculate. Is this addressed to Jin? And is this a satire to those who continue to push the Jin without looking at their condition? Some army even started creating hashtags. Hashtag protect Jin and hashtag let Jin rest. They demand HYB to take responsibility and reveal the true facts about Jin's schedule before the incident. But until now, there has been no explanation that really answers the big question. Why is an artist who has just returned from the military immediately given such a heavy load without consideration? Even more painful was the fact that Jin himself had written in his notes 2 days before the incident, "I really want to show my best, but I was afraid that my body would not stand it." Is this a sign? Did he already know his limit would soon be reached? And now, after everything happened, after Jin's body was rushed to the hospital, after her tears fell without being able to hide anymore, we can all just ask, is this the price of forced perfection? Is this a consequence of inhumane industry standards? Is it time for the entertainment world to stop making idols into robots that are only required to give and continue to give? And the most heartbreaking thing, will the genie rise again, or will she choose to disappear for a long time in order to recover the wounds invisible to the camera? We'll keep digging, because this is not just a story about the fall of the genie. It is a mirror of how we treat human beings behind the magnificent stage, behind the smile, behind the light, behind worldwide handsome as the ambulance carrying Jin rolled through the city's traffic jams. Silence enveloped the set. Some of the crew lowered their heads, unable to look each other in the eye. Some just stood still, clutching cell phones with trembling hands, confused as to what kind of news to give their superiors. Others, perhaps the most honest, cried in silence, realizing that they had watched someone collapse in plain sight, and they did nothing. The question is, who is most responsible? Was this purely an accident due to Jin's unrestored stamina? Or is it the result of inhuman decisions taken by those behind the scenes? Rumors began to roll, not only among the staff, but also in the wider fandom. Some say that Jin actually asked to postpone this project, that he had already applied informally for his acting debut began a few months after he adjusted from military life. But for some reason, the application was rejected. Because Jin's name is too big to delay, said one anonymous source from the production crew, who was interviewed by independent journalists. The deadline has been set. The advertising contract has already been signed. Investors have already deposited. There is no room for change, even for health though. The words echoed loudly, as if slapping the logic and heart of whoever heard them. Is it true that the industry has reached a point where health is no longer a priority? Not only that, but another surprising piece of information emerged. It turned out that before the last shooting day, the day Jin finally fell, he had undergone reshoots for 3 important scenes because the director's visual direction had changed. That means Jin has to repeat the scene of running in the artificial rain 5 times a day. Every time he finished the take, Jin's clothes were soaked and his body shivered. However, for the sake of getting the perfect cinematic result, the camera continues to rotate, and ironically, the director had praised Jin for the realism in the falling scene before realizing that Jin had completely lost consciousness. The applause that initially sounded at the location turned into a frantic scream in just a matter of seconds. Who could forget the sound of Jin's last sigh before his body hit the ground? Still not enough. There's more in a leaked voicemail from the crew's internal group. A manager from the agency is heard saying, "If this is viral, we use it for promotion." Netizens love the drama. Such a cold sentence made many soldiers feel betrayed. Is it true that this painful event is used as a promotional tool? Where is humanity? But not all are silent. J-Hope and RM, Jin's group mates in BTS, immediately made meaningful uploads on social media. RM wrote, "Even the strongest man can fall. Don't ask when he gets up. Ask who made him fall." While J-Hope uploaded an old photo with Jin with a short caption, "We are with you, Hyung." Taehyung V, who is known to be quite expressive in voicing his feelings, is even seen to be secretly present at the hospital where Jin is being treated. Wearing a mask and a black hoodie, he simply said to a reporter who saw him, "He's not an actor. He's human." But they treated him like he was a machine. A sentence that shook and immediately went viral on various social media. Jin's condition is now reported to be stable but still requires intensive care. According to information from the hospital, 1 week after the heartbreaking incident, the scent of fear still felt thick among the halls of the production. The project that was initially projected as a spectacular launch for Jin in the world of acting is now turning into a battleground between professional and humanitarian demands. In the midst of an increasingly heated public spotlight, another fact was finally revealed, one that made the fans' blood boil. A lighting crew that voted anonymous finally raised its voice through a post in the online community. In the post, he explained how Jin had actually been showing signs of serious fatigue since 3 days before fainting. "He vomited twice in the locker room," she wrote. His hands trembled while reading the script. But every time we asked, he just smiled and said, "I'm fine." A little more finish. A sentence that now feels like a gaping wound in the hearts of many people. What made Jin force himself like that? What is he afraid of? To prefer to endure pain rather than ask for respite? The answer may have been in a 22-second voicemail allegedly from Jin himself, sent to one of his closest associates the day before the incident. The message was eventually leaked and went viral globally. Jin's voice sounded weak, but firm. "I'm afraid they think I'm not strong enough. I've been given this great opportunity. If I stop now, I'm afraid everything will be lost." Tears broke everywhere. Not just because Jin sounds fragile, but because many see themselves in that voice. The voice of a hard worker haunted by guilt at not being able to complete a task, even though his own body is already signaling danger. Is this what is called a successful system? A system that makes a world-class idol feel he has no right to rest. HYB finally opened her voice. But no apology was given. Only a stiff statement stated that their side regrets the incident and that Jin is resting as per medical advice. There is no recognition of work pressure. There is no admission that they had any part in pressuring Jin to his physical limits, but what happened next was completely unexpected. Jin's mother, who had always chosen to be behind the scenes, finally made a bold move. In a handwritten letter that Jin's sister uploaded to social media, she conveyed her heart's content as a mother. And the contents really imprinted. "My son is not a puppet, not a tool, not numbers. He is my flesh and blood. I didn't give birth to it to be wiped out behind a spotlight. Do not force him to continue to glow if it burns his own body." The letter went viral in no time. Many netizens from all over the world translated it into various languages. Many parents, especially the mothers of the army, expressed full support. Even some mental health activists shared the letter as a symbol of resistance to overworking culture, but what was most surprising was the response from senior actors in Korea. Some big names who are known to be highly respected, such as Choi Min-sik and Lee Byung-hun, also voiced their empathy. In an interview, Lee said, "Talent is not just about working hard, it's also about knowing when to stop. The industry must learn that not everyone can be shaped with pressure like an iron ingot." The statement sparked a national debate. Television began to open special segments discussing the working conditions of celebrities. Some lawyers even advised Jin to sue legally if there are indications of breach of contract to the detriment of his health. But as many people know, Jin is not the type who chooses direct confrontation. But still, this is no longer about a genie. It is about how all of us, as connoisseurs of works, begin to demand real change. Back at the hospital where Jin was being treated, the mood began to improve. His body is slowly recovering, but his mental, that's another story. In an exclusive interview with a close friend who did not want to be named, it was said that Jin cried when he saw footage of his last scene. He said, "That's the face of a person who is not strong anymore. But I still smile at the camera." Jungkook came a few days ago, wearing a mask and hat. carrying Jin's favorite snacks and portable games.